Great. Well, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, from the general as to why Kenya is on the march and a fantastic macro destination for investment, to the specific. And I'm going to introduce you to three incredible businesses, each with a fantastic story to tell. I'm Wayne Hennessy Barrett. I'm founder, CEO of 4G Capital, the neobank for Africa. We have been active in Kenya and Uganda almost for 10 years now, providing small micro enterprises with the working capital they need to grow and blending that with the enterprise training to give them the ways and the means to succeed. And so it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce Zorab Mawani, Director of the Africa Energy Development Corporation, Yvonne Okafor, the Investment Officer for Untapped Global, and Aisha Rahim, CEO and co-founder of Farms2U. We're going to make it snappy. Okay, we'll stay within the 30 minutes, and if we're disciplined enough, there'll be time for a Q&A at the end of this panel session, but very happily, we roll from this into a networking session. So if you want to invest in these fantastic organizations, or indeed if you want to court their investment, please, these are the people to speak to. So without further ado, Zorab, tell us who you are, why you're passionate about what you do, the problem you're solving, the solution that your company provides, the size of the market, and what you're looking to do to push forward to the next level.
Great, thank you very much. And good afternoon to everybody. I think we just passed the afternoon mark. So I'm Zorab Mawani, and I'm from Kenya. I was born in Kenya and grew up there for my young years and then moved to Canada when I was quite young. But I think it's this exposure to nature in Kenya and just being out in the bush a lot as a youngster that really created the environmentalist in me. So as I grew up in Canada, I really pursued the environmentalist side of things, and I started to read about climate change back in the 80s, and it became a real concern of mine, passion, and thought that I'd leave it up to our governments and business leaders to take action on this big issue. But that was back in the 80s, and as I built my career working for government, working for utilities in Canada and the US, I realized in the early 2000s that not much is happening about climate change. So I moved to the private sector and focused my career on renewable energy development. So I've been doing that since 2002. Have developed and built about 1.5 gigawatts of wind and solar projects in Canada and the US. Have been involved in high voltage DC transmission to deliver renewable resources to load centers. And in 2013, I decided I'd like to come back to Kenya and start a business to help Kenya leapfrog fossil fuels, to contribute to economic development in Kenya, to contribute to empowerment. There were many reasons I wanted to come back to Kenya and create a positive force. So I started my company back in 2013, Africa Energy Development Corporation. We wanted it to sound a bit like a government agency, a little bit official. It's maybe, I don't know, maybe we need something more inventive now, innovative, but we're doing some innovative things. We started with utility scale solar, so we developed the 52 megawatt Malindi Solar project near the coast in Kenya. We're the original developer. It took many years to get that developed and operating. It started operation in January of this year, so 9 years. These projects shouldn't take 9 years to do. They should take 2 years max. We're trying to create impact. That's our goal. We're trying to reduce emissions. We're trying to reduce footprints for people. We're trying to give access to electricity. So before I say that, what our solution and our problem that we're trying to solve is, I'd just like to say that the passion for me, the reason I jump out of bed every morning is to help solve these problems for Kenyans and for Africans and for people around the world, is to improve access to electricity, to give more reliable and less costly electricity, but also to help people find a path that is less impactful, that we can, avoid fossil fuels and move away from fossil fuels. So that's what gets me out of bed. And I've described the problem as well. The access to electricity is a big problem in many parts of Africa. It used to be a bigger problem for Kenya. Now in Kenya, we have over 70% access to electricity, so it's getting better. In urban areas, it's 94%. So it's getting a lot better, but there's still a lot of challenges with electricity, with the cost of electricity, reliable electricity. So we can help fix those things. We're also expanding our reach to other countries where access to electricity, for example, DRC, is only 20%. So those problems that we're trying to solve, our solution is primarily solar PV. And we have been focused on commercial industrial scale, so small and medium scale projects for factories, hotels, hospitals, water utilities, all sorts of businesses, universities. We still do have development of grid scale solar, but we don't expect those to move very fast. So that's the solution we're providing. We also have expertise in other renewable technologies, so we are offering that to our customers. There's sometimes use cases where solar PV doesn't make the most sense. It's another resource that we can use. Solar PV is generally the least costly, so that's mainly our focus. And in terms of the market is huge. It's potentially the replacement of all the generation on the grid today. And in many countries, the grid is limited in its reach and in power that it provides to the population. So in addition to replacing the grid power, we can also build up, with access to electricity, we can improve access to electricity in remote areas, provide off-grid solutions, mini grids. So we are doing a lot of those as well. We're working with some multinationals that, even though it's a corporate customer, they want to provide solar. They want solar on their factories, but they also want to empower the villages, the people that live and work around their factories. So we're looking at mini grids around those factories, so that the multinational companies can improve the quality of life for their workers, which I think is excellent direction we're going in. And it helps that these multinationals receive a better ESG score when they do these things. That doesn't hurt. With all this said, what we're looking for right now is we have a tranche of about 21 megawatts of commercial industrial projects, including the water utilities, including hospitals, including factories that we are now ready to build. And so it's about $33 million US dollar investment that we're seeking for these projects. It's essentially a tranche of projects that we're financing right now for those that are ready to build. We have a portfolio that's approaching 100 megawatts of these smaller, medium-scale projects. So we'd like to ultimately find a long-term investment partner that would work with us to build out this portfolio, scale up the business, and help us expand our reach across Africa. We're already investigating other markets in East Africa, but also in West Africa, and the opportunity is huge. So look forward to talking to anyone that's interested. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic, Zora. Thank you, and really inspiring. Clean and green energy for a growing population, particularly in austere areas, is, I think we can agree, kind of a global priority. So moving on to Aisha, tell us about Farms to You and tell us about yourselves.
Yes, great to see everyone. Hopefully the sun is out now because it was a bit muggy, typical British weather earlier today. But yeah, co-founder and CEO of Farms to You. We have operations both in Nigeria and Kenya. And I have to tell you, Kenya just has a special place in my heart. I'm originally Nigerian, so British Nigerian. But if there's another country I would live, I've only lived in Lagos or London, it'll have to be Nairobi. It's like you come out of your apartment, wherever you are, you can see a park or, see it's just really wild. So Kenya is a very beautiful country with very, very strong reforestation targets, protecting their forests. So it's certainly a place to want to invest in if really the interest from your end is climate resilience and protecting the future of our climate. So what does Farms2U do? We help informal demand users better access supply-side services. What I mean by that, and an example of an informal demand user, is a smallholder farmer. This is typically a person that might not have the financial history that a corporate worker in a bank would have, and that would be classed as a formal demand user. The challenge with informal demand users accessing services from banks or selling their products to off-takers is the fact of how unstructured they are in terms of their operations. If a farmer walks into a bank, a smallholder farmer specifically, questions like, what is your monthly salary? I want to see your payroll, are not applicable to such a user. And the challenge shouldn't be on the smallholder farmer, but more so building infrastructure to help those formal banks better communicate with informal demand users such as smallholder farmers. An example is, so for instance, in Nigeria, we work with Sterling Bank in Pivo, Africa, where we deploy capital from those lenders to smallholder farmers. We provide them with risk scoring, where we essentially assess the risk level of a farmer using things like, what is their yield compared to the average market yield? Does that farmer have insurance? These are data points that are more suited to the farmer, but also helps the lender better assess the risk level of the farmer. So that's how we operate, using our infrastructure, helping informal demand users, starting with smallholder farmers, access competitive supply-side services. Why is that important? In sub-Saharan Africa, subsistence farming is subsistence farmers are the bulk of producers on the continent. But they're unable to operate profitably because, in terms, a commercial farmer would have a better chance accessing a loan from a bank versus a subsistence farmer. But then if you start looking at the carbon impact of production, you can see that the subsistence farmer is actually better for our climate because they're smaller, they don't need huge tractors that are proven to lead to soil degradation. We've seen the impact of the farms in California with the extreme summers that we've had. So now more than ever, it's important to really protect these informal demand users, and an example being the subsistence farmers, because they're actually producing in ways that are better for our environment. Yes, we went through the industrial age where it was all about volume and doing things quicker, but we've seen how that has got us to where we are now. So for us at Farms2U, it's really important to protect the income from folks like subsistence farmers so that they can operate in a more profitable manner whilst also maintaining their sustainability. Why is this of interest to me? I mean, personally, I come from a financial background. I actually worked in the City of London for almost a decade, and with companies like asset managers. Schroders was my last formal gig. But I suppose the reason for wanting to go into this, it's a personal health experience that changed my relationship with food. Being in and out of London and Lagos for most of my young adult life, I noticed, I always use banana as an example. Bananas in England taste like cardboard. It has no taste. Versus if you actually eat bananas from Africa or from Latin America, you can actually feel like you're eating food. And that realization, I was like, okay, so what's in the food? And then this took me through a journey where I started learning about things like aspartame and all these chemicals that our body can't digest. And why do we use all these chemicals? The justification is that we need to produce more food, but we waste more food. During COVID, we wasted more food. There are farms in Ohio that were wasting tons of potatoes because there was just no infrastructure to transport it. So it's a bit wild in terms of thinking about the justification that we're essentially producing more, killing the environment quicker in that manner. But then the justification for wanting to produce more, you're then wasting the food. So really, this is where we came in. Looking specifically at subsistence farmers who produce in a way that is better for the environment in terms of the carbon sequestration, and helping them operate in a more profitable and competitive manner. They don't need to have hundreds of thousands of acres of farms to be able to make a decent profit. With the right infrastructure, they can do that. And now more than ever, it's important to protect those sort of jobs that are better for our environments, because we've seen that the singular focus on just profit is killing our environment, killing the economy. And now more than ever, every nation is interrelated. We've seen the impact of Russia, Ukraine across the board. Pakistan had that terrible flood, which is going to impact food prices. Nigeria had one of its is having crazy floods right now, which has been exacerbated by the Cameroon dam being opened. These would not just be felt in those individual countries, they will be felt on a global level. So yeah, this is why I do what I do at Farms to You. We're currently raising our first formal round of 3 million USD, for which we have some commitments from some investors who are actually here, so happy to introduce you to them for you to learn of their due diligence experience. We work with partners like the Nature Conservancy. We actually just completed a project with them in Machakos, Kenya, where essentially we facilitated trade between regenerative farmers in Kenya to North American supply side buyers, where essentially there are now sustainable sourcing requirements that our infrastructure is able to prove that this produce has been grown sustainably, hence the supplier is meeting their sustainability targets. So yeah, that's me, and happy to chat with anyone that is interested about what we're doing. But I definitely, even if you're not investing in Kenya, definitely visit it, if not just for the very beautiful forests and stuff. Thanks.
Aisha, what a fantastic speech. And again, equally inspiring, not just speaking about her own business, but the importance of a regenerative economy, of running a business in a way that supports not only employees and consumers, and I'm sorry, I hate that word because I'd like to think we're all creators rather than consumers like termites, but that you're actually pushing to create a higher standard output, help small farmers, smallholder farmers, which in turn develops community resilience and helps to reduce the vulnerabilities to offshore dependency, as well as providing a fantastic investment destination. So thank you, truly humbled to hear that. Quick chuck up for the B Corp movement. If you're not B Corporations, I strongly encourage all three of you to become one, as is 4G Capital, one of Africa's leading B Corporations and a proud steward of the movement. Friends, Romans, investors, become a B Corp. If you're not one now, it's never too late. So moving on to Yvonne, tell us about Untapped Global, about your mission, your purpose, and when are you going to invest in these two fantastic enterprises?
Yes, no, definitely happy to. First of all, let me just echo the comments on Kenya. So I live in Kenya, originally from Nigeria. So I've been there for the last 2.5 years. Love it, love the green. Definitely encourage you to visit. Tourism is high there. Maybe I should be talking to the Kenyan Tourism Agency to have me spread that message. But it is a beautiful country, both on the visitation side, but then also on the business side as well. To give you a little more insight on myself and also on Untapped Global. So as I mentioned, I'm Nigerian living in Kenya at the moment, and I'm an investment officer at Untapped Global, and I co-lead our CapEx financing facility. Untapped in itself, our goal is pretty much to bridge the investment gap for SMEs and also investors looking to invest on the continent and having more like a softer landing and introduction in what investing in Africa looks like, or what the advantages of investing in Africa through our pretty much investment platform. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but maybe to give a little more insight of myself. So born in Nigeria, partially raised between Nigeria, Argentina, and then the United States, before now deciding to come back to initially Nigeria, now Kenya, because I've always been driven by development and wanting to build up and develop my home. So being in the States, I focused in finance, did a little bit on the equity investment space, and then came back to continue that on the continent. But I think the main things that kind of drove me towards the financing angle or even the economic development angle is because when I was in Argentina, it was kind of around that time in 2000 when the peso peg fell from the dollar. So I was young then, but the way I saw it was that I saw bank runs, I saw people running into grocery stores. My main question was, why is this happening? My dad tried to explain it at that time, but it was like, oh, something's up with the economy, there's a difficulty, their currency is devaluing. And while maybe I did not understand it then, I think it definitely held a piece in my mind clearly as I'm mentioning it today. Then also back, I think by the time I was back in Nigeria, '08 crisis happened. Nigeria had a number of bank consolidations happening at that time. That was the indirect effect it had on the country, or at least one of them. Again, part of like, okay, what's happening? Why are banks shutting down? Why are banks having to merge? Why are we reducing the number of banks that we have in the economy? And this was still younger me trying to understand what is happening and why can't things just be good? Why can't people just earn money to pretty much live a decent life? So went on to pretty much study econ and finance and really started understanding a lot more about monetary policies, fiscal policies, but then also really thinking through, apart from the government, which yes, has a big mandate to develop their country or individual governments to develop the continent, what is the role in private sector financing in that development as well? Of course, a collaborative role to work with the government, but at the same time, how can the private sector drive that through their own mandate? So coming into the SME financing space and then looking at equity investments, which are very important, of course, in the growth and development of individual companies, I think there's also been a gap on the debt investment side. So while if you're looking at debt investments provided by banks or even provided by some other venture debt institutions, there's always this big need for collateral. So what can we what kind of collateral can we get from you to ensure that we'll get repaid? Very understandable. I mean, you have to manage your risk. You need to make sure you're in a secure position. But what that has left is a huge financing mid-gap that can't access the necessary debt capital that they need to scale. And what that has caused is a lot of companies avoiding, going to get debt capital, which can actually be a great enabler to grow businesses. So introducing Untapped's model here. So I think our primary mode of financing is through our CapEx financing facility, where we finance assets through partnerships and SMEs as a way to pretty much help them scale their businesses in that segment while they use equity investments to scale the operational side. So we're very complementary to all the other investment models out there. But the innovative side of this is that huge demand for the huge either monetary collateral or even the asset collateral. We replace that through a data-driven approach. So one of the things that we do require is financing assets where we're able to access the data for us to pretty much, first of all, better understand the business as it grows and as the finances that we provide support the growth of that business. But then the other side of it is that we get our repayments through a revenue share. So implementing a revenue-based financing approach, with our data-driven asset financing approach, has proven to be a very successful and a great way to kind of bridge that mid-gap where an SME comes, they're a little too early for a bank to consider giving them money because they maybe don't have that huge collateral on the back end. But they have data, which kind of gives you insight of the business. You're able to see and monitor their growth, and you're able to understand their potential for scale. So providing capital to them at that stage to finance these assets, being able to monitor the growth of their business through these assets, but then also now using the data to make future data-driven decisions to provide additional capital to support their scale. So that's kind of a quick summary on TAP's model. Now, on the other side, where we also see ourselves is that we're pretty much bridging the investment gap, like I mentioned, for international investors, either both on the institutional side, but then also on the individual side that want to invest on the continent, but kind of like taking a softer landing to do it, to finance, I would say, provide capital through us and invest in our financing facility and able to participate in the growth that we are enabling through our asset financing model. And happy to kind of talk individually to that. Our CEO is also here to shed a lot more light as well into that. So in terms of the model, which, like I understand, revenue-based financing is not new. Data-driven asset financing has had its place in different companies across the world. But now combining those two together and focusing it on generally emerging markets, but starting with Africa as a continent, we've seen it works. So far we've worked with about 29 partners across different sectors, across 10 countries in Africa, one in Latin America, where one of our companies that's in Africa that's operating on the continent expanded into Mexico, supporting them through that growth. And so far we financed almost about 10,000 individual assets, which is supporting individual entrepreneurs to pretty much, first of all, some of them that do more lease to own financing, own these assets, help them increase their disposable income. So we've seen a lot of positive impact in that. We've seen a lot of growth in it, and we're opportunistically looking to scale that across different sectors as well. Some examples of the sectors that we've pretty much worked in, mobility is a big one, financing things like two-wheelers, three-wheelers. Electric mobility is also an interesting segment as well, which in Kenya, as we know, is scaling rapidly, with Kenya having a very enabling environment for e-mobility to grow, from the two-wheelers to even the battery swapping stations as well. So I think that's also an interesting conversation to have, and there's also an e-mobility session happening later today that I think will be very intriguing for everyone to really understand a lot more about the opportunity in e-mobility. We've done payments by financing POS systems with some partners. We've done solar-powered assets, so think solar-powered cool boxes, focusing on things like post-harvest losses, but also just market and SMEs, so working where these cool boxes are provided to women in the market or entrepreneurs in the market as a way for them to reduce their losses when things like power outages happen. Where also things like water ATMs, gas stations, healthcare devices as well. So that's kind of like an example of how Untapped is supporting the growth on the continent. Untapped is supporting the growth in Kenya specifically. I think on the flip side, in terms of asks, we're always looking for more operating partners to partner with. So think of any SME that may have data-driven assets that you're looking to finance as a way to scale their business. We are also fundraising as well. I think both on the equity and debt side, we're always looking for people who are looking to invest in our financing facility and support the growth across the continent, but then also looking for co-investment partners as well for some of the companies that we work with too. So happy to shed a lot more light after the session, but thank you.
Brilliant. Another fantastic brief, not only as an expert investor in your own right, but as a conduit for wider investment through some really expert filters to make sure that that quantum is getting to the right place. Quick question, what's your general ticket size? What kind of check do you write using your innovative structure?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we kind of do it in a two-phase approach.
Briefly, please,
Yeah,
because we've
no
already
problem.
had the mass bell.
So we start with, let's say, a ticket size of 50 to 100K, and then kind of use that as a way to pilot and monitor the partnership between ourselves and the SMEs. And then we scale up for anywhere to 250 to
Great.
a couple million.
Okay, that's really helpful for everybody. Right, rounding up. Zohan, what's the, Zorab, what is the number one thing you want to get from this conference? Speak it and it will manifest.
Well, it's always good to learn while you're at these conferences, and networking is great. We are in the process of financing this tranche that I mentioned, so we are talking to some investors now, and I think being here in London for this week, it would be good to just advance that discussion and that process. I think that's the main goal here.
Capital, got it. Aisha, what's your number one priority you want to get out of this conference?
Number one, again, because we're fundraising capital, but capital with a focus on venture building and the permanent capital structure, simply because lack of infrastructure is one of the, low infrastructure access is one of the challenges that we have on the continent. So return to ROI is usually a lot longer, but I do think, I caveat that to say that the impact is a lot greater and you can make higher percentages. So those are capital with that focus of venture building and permanent capital as well.
Aligned investment, absolutely.
I think just probably echoing financing partners who are looking to invest in our asset financing vehicle, co-investment partners as well, because as much as we're financing assets, the companies also do still need equity and other financial instruments as well. And then operating partners, so companies that you think may be good partners for us to finance their assets and need that in order to scale their growth.
Fantastic. So the hourglass, you're looking for capital to push forward, and you're also looking for pipeline yourself. So small ventures, companies that need your kind of catalytic investment, this is the lady to speak to. What a fantastic session. We'll wrap it up there. That's bang on time. Please, we're going straight into networking after this. So come and speak to these three inspiring individuals, and please give them a big round of applause now.